Um, Welcome back to Behind the Play. My name is Alex Adams, and I am joined, I think, for the third time by Jamie McLennan of TSN and Overdrive. Thanks so much for taking the time, Jamie, especially on this day where a lot of stuff has happened in Leafland. So just maybe walk us through what it's like to be on radio in Toronto when the coach of the Toronto Maple Leafs is fired.
Yeah, I mean, busy day. Obviously, when you look at it, it's never, it's never a good day when somebody gets let go. You always have to remember the human side of this, right? Like it's a sport, and yes, lots of money exchanges hands, but there's a human side of this. So somebody lost their job today. His life will never be the same because he's not going to coach the Toronto Maple Leafs anymore. So, he's a good coach. Everyone has an expiration date. I read a stat today that with Sheldon Keefe being fired and Rick Bowness stepping down, this will be the 19th coach
Yeah.
in this last calendar year. I mean, that's crazy. But you know what? It was time. And, you could argue maybe the time was last summer. I don't know. But, in hindsight, Brad Treliving and Brendan Shanahan and Keith Pelly, the new CEO of MLSE, is going to speak tomorrow. So we'll get some insight as to what they're thinking. But bottom line is it's going to be a changing of the guard, and I think if Tree Living probably has his way, it's the first of many moves that's going to happen in Leafland. So yeah, it's busy.
Hmm.
This market craves hockey, as you know, and it is a hockey market, and this is a very big topical situation, and the team is it's a good team, but they haven't been able to get over the hump. So the coach pays for that today.
With that, just obviously he's been in Toronto for I think 5, 6 seasons now. How would you evaluate his tenure with the Toronto Maple Leafs? Is it almost like the core four where, they were good but not good enough?
Well, it's twofold because in the regular season they set records, right? I think they had a 115-point season a couple of years ago. That was the most the Toronto Maple Leafs have ever gotten in a regular season. 115, 111, 105. Like they've always been a 100-point team here recently. So you can point to the regular season success. I believe Sheldon Keefe is like top three in the history of the game in the regular season as far as winning percentage. So that is something that he should be proud of. But then again, I think he's been with the organization 9 years, worked with the Marlies, and then has come up the last five. You got one playoff win, one playoff round win for that. And, again, I come back to there's a lot of different things that factor into it. But bottom line and he even said in his video today, I thought his video was very classy. He said,
Hmm.
ultimately, I didn't get it done. Well, the guys go out on the ice. They're the ones who didn't get it done. But the coach pays the price. And I would argue that maybe some of the players will pay the price at some point here. But his tenure was very successful in the regular season, and it falls short in the playoffs, kind of like we've seen with their team.
And you alluded to it there that he's might be just the first domino. A lot of buzz about Mitch Marner. I think with Matthews obviously signed and Nylander as well, it seems as though he might be the odd man out. How difficult do you think that will be for the Leafs to do, and how likely do you think that happens, or is it a more wait and see kind of thing with Marner?
I, I honestly think it's a wait and see thing because when a player of his caliber, which let's not forget, let's remove emotion, he's a superstar, and he's close to 100 points, never gotten 100 points, but right around at 99, 97, all of that. Um, but he makes 11 million a year, needs a contract as of, he's going
Hmm.
into his last year, and he has a full no move clause. So Mitch Marner and his family and his agency and all of that, they control his destiny for this next calendar year. Um, Whether he wants to stay, whether he wants to move on, that's up to Mitch Marner and his camp. The other part of it is whether the Toronto Maple Leafs want to extend him and want him a part of the core moving forward. That's another, thing to unpack. So the two might be aligned, but they might be completely opposite.
Mm.
So, Mitch Marner's name thrown around, John Tavares in the last year of his deal at 11 million. So within a year, you could have 22 million come off the books. It's actually, TJ Brody's coming off the books this summer, but Nylander's basically taking that money and adding it to his salary. So, there's lots of change in the air. Again, I don't have any insight. It's more about, Mitch Marner, the player, has earned the no move clause or negotiated it in his deal. So now the Leafs are going to have to work with him if he wants to move, or work with him if he wants to stay and try and drive his value up into unrestricted free agency.
With that, just on Marner, he's always really struggled in the playoffs to perform at the level, as you mentioned, as a 99, 97 point guy. What do you think that is? Is it mindset? Obviously there's the famous video of them bickering on the bench between him and Nylander, and you've
Yeah.
seen him in the Amazon series getting frustrated as well. What do you think? Maybe is it just how his game translates to the playoffs? Why do you think he's been maybe not so successful in the playoffs?
Yeah, I think a combination of everything. And keep in mind, this guy kills penalties. He's on the power play. You know, it's not Mitch Marner's fault that the power play went 4% in the playoffs this year. But he's one of five guys out there. So, you can point to a lot of different things. The game translating to the playoffs, regular season, there's a lot more time and space out there. So you're able to slow the game down, create. It's not as physical. In the playoffs, it's extremely physical. So, you add a lot of different things in. Now he's gotten points. There's no doubt about that. Even I have to look, but it's probably a point a game a guy. I would argue maybe
Yeah,
even
close to it.
more. But that being said, I remember last year when they beat Tampa, they lost 7-3 in the first game. He got 3 assists. I think with the argument or the debate when it comes to Mitch Marner is, when the chips are down, do you get a big play from a highly paid guy? And the same could actually apply to all of them. I know Willie Nylander scored 3 goals. He had 3 points, in 4 games. And Austin Matthews has 1 goal in his last 10 playoff games for a guy who scored 69 goals this year and is going to pick up his third rocket. It's not just reserved for Mitch Marner.
Mm.
But getting back to the question, his game, it doesn't translate as well into a physical ground and pound, dump and chase. He's a puck possession guy. He's elusive, and in the playoffs, to be elusive, you almost have to do it at very high speeds. And he's a guy who likes to slow the game down. So it's been a struggle for him, just from the outside. But again, it's not just Mitch Marner. It's the whole crew. Instead of finding ways to win in recent years, and even this year, they've kind of found ways to lose, unfortunately. And they played an airtight game in Game 7, and one set play ends it all. And there was a combination of mistakes, and unfortunately, they come up on the short end of that. But they played 3 really good hockey games in a row, and they lost Game 7 when it was critical.
With that, obviously, with him, struggling in the playoffs, but the team itself struggled in the playoffs, as you mentioned, and they didn't really get any depth scoring as well. Not to mention their big guys. If you're Brad Treliving looking at this roster, what's your maybe the main focus that you want to address? Is it the depth forwards, defense, goaltending, which was good hit and miss with Samsonov and Wall, but both had their spells as well.
Yeah, I would like to say all three. Now, within moderation, because Tyler Bertuzzi, Max Domi, are they going to come back, right? And even if you want to sign them, how much money are they going to want? I can't see both of them coming back. You've got Yarncroke. There is some positives. Matthew Nyes pushed through. Nick Robertson looks like he's going to be an NHL player. Um, they've got some found money in Simone Benoit, a 25-year-old defenseman who can probably, second pairing, probably third pairing guy, but he's on a value contract. So you have some things, but I would argue that they need to, instead of just having your core four up front with John Tavares as an aging guy, right? He plays a 34-year-old next year. So that's a challenge. and he's making 11 million. So you need Yarncroke to step up. You need Nyes to step up, but you need to add to that group. If you're not going to bring Domi and Bertuzzi back, or if you bring one of them back, you're still going to need to add to that depth of the group. You know, on the back end, I think that's where the major overhaul needs to come. Now, TJ Brody's coming off the books. But you need, in my opinion, a top two defenseman or a top four defenseman, maybe a three, I would say, because if
Hmm.
McCabe is your four. And then that'll slot Benoit a little bit deeper down. That'll slot Liljegren down. So you need one defenseman, maybe two, that can play in that top 4-5 scenario. And it's easier said than done because you got to spend money on that, and if you have to acquire them, that's going to cost you assets. And then Joseph Wall seems like he's the goaltender of the future, or even the goaltender of the now, but he's had injury issues throughout his career. So you're going to need to bring in a veteran goaltender. I don't think it's Martin Jones, but there's going to be lots of goaltenders around that you need somebody to play with Joseph Wall in the event that he can't be healthy. And, that's a giant if because small sample size, but he's been unfortunately early in his career, he's had some injuries. So I think there's lots of work to be done, but it's not unachievable. It's like you got to figure out how it all fits financially.
Yeah, and with that, my curious thing for you is a lot of times these teams that win the cup are on entry level deals, like some of their stars, or Nathan McKinnon was on that crazy $6 million a year deal for what was it, 8 years or whatever the case may be. In this case, for the Leafs, they paid all their guys. Have they missed their window at all, or how close are they? Do you think in the next 2-3 years with a prime Matthews, Nylander to get back to being a cup contender?
Well, I don't think they've missed their window. I think the look of the window has to change. And
Mm,
that's, we call it the core four. You spend all your money on four forwards. So if you're still going to have them, yes, the cap's going up, but the money's going to go to Nylander and you have to spend money on the back end and stuff. So you need to shape the team a little bit different. But I think the way it's constructed, as it is today, and I would just say this May 9th today, that's not a cup contending team. Doesn't
mm,
mean you don't have the pieces that are cup contenders, where you've got, a little bit of depth there. You've got star players, but, Joseph Wall looks like a good goaltender, but can you trust him? There's lots of question marks. And I think that's where Brad Treliving has to answer those questions and say, I like our D. They're not just
mhm,
capable, it's a really good defensive core because that's what I'm looking at. There's a history, especially in the last 30 years. If you look at cup winning teams, they pretty much have an alpha dog, like a number one defenseman who chews up 28 minutes a night or can do that. The only outlier would be Carolina, I think, in 06. That was
mhm,
kind of by committee, but they had six really good defensemen. So you look at it, that's where I would circle and say the most work and resources has to go into that. And then you can find a goaltender to play, a veteran goalie to play with Wall. You can add to some of the depth of your group. And, it might come through osmosis. So I'll get back to the first question. If Mitch Marner puts up his hand and says, I need a change of scenery, you find a change of scenery and financially, you're going to lift up some of the restraints. But I still say careful what you wish for because you're probably going to lose that trade, right?
mhm,
But
mhm.
what you're gaining is maybe a couple players who are $5 million players, or maybe it looks a little bit different, and you can allot the money somewhere else.
I'm curious for you, obviously, because today, and we talked about Keefe earlier. You played in the NHL for a long time. Obviously, goalie's a bit different than, a skater, but how
Yeah.
much how much do you think a coach can impact winning from taking a team from, struggling in the first round to that next level, or how much of it is maybe on the players as well?
Well, it's a lot's on the players because they've got to execute. But a coach can motivate, a coach can implement systems and demand that accountability that system,
Hmm.
stay within it. And when you've got a hardened coach, we'll just call it a coach that's hard on the players and not shy to hurt feelings here or there. If you've got somebody like that, then some of the play is non-negotiable. You're just like a coach has one thing in today's world, ice time. If
Mm,
you take ice time away, other than that, you're not taking money away or term of a contract or anything. These players are going to outlast the coach. So what you can do is say, if you want to play a lot of minutes for me, you have to play a certain way or play within structure. And coaches will have their favorites and the most guys that they trust. But I think the bigger picture is, um, finding and develop, like, as a coach, you have to like the team that you have. So you
mm,
work with the manager and go, this is the way I want to coach. In order for me to coach this system, I need big defensemen. I need mobile wingers. You kind of lay it out for the manager to shape that team so that the coach goes, this is what I envision for the team. Tough to play against, hardworking, physical, maybe can fight, bigger defenders, force everything outside. Oh no, and I happen to have a really good goaltender too. So
mm.
there's all these things that check marks that the coach and the manager have to work together on.
I want to transition a little bit to obviously the playoffs and you follow it pretty closely for TSN.
Yeah.
What do you look for as a former player, now analyst, when you watch playoff hockey? What are you looking for when you're evaluating? Is there specific things in mind that you think maybe translate the most to playoff success? Obviously, whoever scores more goals in a game wins, but just what do you look for in the
Um,
playoff time?
I would say players who get comfortable being uncomfortable.
Mm,
So I saw David Pasternak fight last night. That's not something, in a Bruins fan wants to see on a Tuesday in November, but they're fine seeing it when their team is getting blown out, when it's kind of turned into fight night, and Matthew Kachuk's trying to push you around, and Pasternak says, "Not on my watch. I'm going to stand up for my team." Then he goes and asks the coach, and the coach goes, "Do you want to fight him? Go ahead, go ahead." So it was, to me, those are galvanizing moments. I look for little details of guys going, you know, not tonight on my watch. And
mm,
listen, Boston got run out of the building last night. They had a bad night. They didn't play well. But they've got to be happy having a split in Florida. And what Boston did is send a message to Florida is, we're not going to be pushed around.
mm,
And, the one thing I was so impressed with, and I'll come back to David Pasternak, he took some really hard hits against the Leafs. Hard hits. Joel Edmondson in game 7 ran him over in the first period. He got up. He got
mm.
up and he ended up winning, getting the game winning goal in
Yeah.
overtime. Where easily you could have seen a skilled player lay there, say, not going to happen tonight, and mail in the rest of the game.
Hmm.
Not the case. So what I look for is guys who step out of their comfort zone to be difference makers. May not be a goal, but it's a big block. It's a big hit. It's a momentum change. It's something that you can do to help your team win. If every it's a, I want to say it's a lazy thing, but everybody pulling on the rope.
Hmm.
And there's leaders, but there's also people that are just there helping and supporting. And that's what I look for when I look at games is who's stepping out of their comfort zone, who's special tonight. Not maybe, there's other players. There's players like David Pasternak's a special player, but you look at a third line guy, Danton Heinen, who's in Danton Heinen could have a huge play on a forecheck or defensively that affects the outcome of the series or the outcome of that game that night. And that's what I look for is who's stepping up at critical times. And that's what's most important to me when I'm watching all of these games.
Well, I know you were up late last night watching the Oilers versus
Yeah.
Canucks, of course, and a guy that chipped in who has been a bit of an unsung hero was Connor Garland. Just looking at that series, it looks like the Oilers yet again will struggle defensively, goaltending. How much of this series rests on the shoulders of Stuart Skinner and Connor McDavid, and how much maybe does Vancouver can they dictate that series at the same time?
Well, a little bit of both. So Skinner didn't have a good game, but he didn't have a good game number 2 against LA, where they lost 5-4. They should have won that game. That was game two after they blew the doors off them in game one. Um, Last night, I thought Edmonton to a man, outside of Zach Hyman getting 2 goals, I thought they were terrible. They weren't emotionally engaged that much. They kind of just showed up and played hockey. And Vancouver continued to play playoff hockey. And had Sheloff, the goaltender, not been so kind of shaky and guessing on plays, that game was not going to be a 4-1 game. Like, I think the score was flattering to the way that Edmonton was playing. I didn't like their game at all. I thought Vancouver did a great job of limiting time and space on McDavid. Draisaitl, it looks like he's banged up, but who knows if he's going to fight through it. He's a pretty tough guy. Um, but they made Edmonton uncomfortable and really leaned on them. And when came to shove, there was some special plays, and the goalie, they couldn't get a save when they needed it. So I would say it all comes back to, yes, McDavid and Skinner, but I would say it's more the commitment that the Oilers are willing. And we saw it. They won 16 games in a row, and there was a reason why. It was a commitment to try and win. They won different ways every night. They weren't winning 7-6. They were winning 3-1 with an empty netter, 2-1, 3-2, that type of stuff. It's a commitment to playing a team game. They've shown they can do it. They just got away from it last night. Problem is, it's a huge game tomorrow because you got to try and steal one on the road heading into your own building for game three.
Is it with obviously Draisaitl being banged up and this team feels with the Oilers that they've been a bit of a two-man show for so many years, but this season it felt as though there's been more depth players playing. Obviously Zach Hyman getting or Shaq Hyman getting 50
Yeah.
goals, but just is that something where you think this team's maybe a bit different than Oilers teams of the past?
Oh, 100%. Ryan McLeod turned a corner as a player. They got a young kid, Dylan Holloway. Corey Perry drops into their lap, with his situation, with the Chicago. Evander Kane, still a 20-plus goal scorer this year and didn't have a great year. I look at their depth. It's a lot. Ryan Nugent Hopkins, like they got a lot of good players. Warren Fogle had a career year. I think Matthias Janmark is a nice player, good penalty killer. They go and get Adam Henrique at the deadline. He's a really, really serviceable Swiss Army knife. So they're really deep, and they've got veteran savvy. On the back end, I think you look at Ekholm, the trade of Ekholm, it almost affected their whole D because it
Mhm.
took some of the big minutes away from Darnell Nurse. So it allowed him and Cece to just kind of play hockey. Now Ekholm settles down. Bouchard, who has a career year. Oh, by the way, gets 82 points this year. Yes, power play specialist, but 82 points is 82 points. So, and then that pushes that third pairing down. Desharnais, 6'7" defenseman, big and mean, plays physical. And then you've got Kulak, who's a really good skater. So I think there's a lot of balance with that team this year, as opposed to it's not just a two-man team. There's balance there. Now we'll see. I mean, if Draisaitl doesn't show up tomorrow, they're going to be, minus a superstar. But I would argue 97 is probably not going to go zero for shots or points in a game in the playoffs. So we'll see if there's a response tomorrow night.
As a former goalie, did you ever have a team that maybe felt as though they had your number? Because Stuart Skinner really has struggled against the Canucks this year in the regular season and obviously in the first game. Does that get into your mind at all, or is it more
Uh,
just a bit different with
yes
playoff?
and no. I mean, I never had a deep career in the playoffs, so I can't speak to that. But I would say that there's certain teams, certain buildings where you're more comfortable with or less comfortable with. Um, Jack Campbell played a game. Calvin Pickard played a game in those losses this year. Excuse me. But, um, Skinner's got to be the guy. I thought he was really good in series number one against LA. Didn't have a great showing last night. So you need a response. And for the most part, he's been a guy who's responded this year. So he's their guy. They're sinking or swimming with him.
Mm.
But, Vancouver is 5-0 now against Edmonton this season. Different storylines, different excuses, all of that. The first 3 games were in the first 15 where they were at the bottom of the league. The last game in the regular season, McDavid didn't play. But last night, they played and they handed one away back to Vancouver, or Vancouver went and earned it. But Edmonton's got to find a solution.
Before I let you go, I just, obviously I cover the Senators. I see you around the rink a lot. You know that team
Yep.
pretty well. You do what, 50, 40, 50 broadcasts
50,
a
yeah.
season of them. Just maybe what do you think of the Travis Green hire on speaking about coaches? Is he the right fit in your mind? I know you spoke to Steve Staios yesterday on Overdrive, talking about accountability. Um,
Yeah.
what do you think of Green as a coach in Ottawa?
Well, I have to preface my comments saying that I played junior with Greeny when we were 16.
Hmm.
So we've been good friends for 35 years. So, um, when he was coaching in Vancouver, when he was coaching in Syracuse in the minors, we've always been friends. Um, so I've watched his progression as a coach. First time around, there's a learning curve, right? But I would argue that this Ottawa team kind of mirrors what Vancouver used to be. Young
Hmm.
stars still learning, and Travis was his first time around there. So Quinn Hughes, could be Jake Sanderson and different players, but you know
Yeah.
what I mean. Pedersen could be Stutzla, and Travis had that and managed them, and he's coming into a different situation now where I think Steve Staios is going to surround the young players with some veteran guys to help them get to the next level. So I tell everybody in Ottawa who's questioning the move is let's look at the finished product and how he's able to work with the finished product. Because I think the team's going to be better on paper next year. They're going to go and be proactive. I think they're going to have to make some trades and some tough decisions, but they'll do it to make their team better. Um, the one thing I've always liked, and this is, I think there's a common theme
Hmm.
with what Ottawa, it says that they interviewed 7 or 8 guys, whatever the number was. The common theme seemed to be the same. Uh, Guys who played the game, guys who aren't shy to be a little bit stern, terse, um, and but have to be progressive and understand the new athlete. And Travis checks those boxes. I know people are talking about Craig Berube. Craig Berube might surface somewhere else where you go, okay, that makes sense. That's the reason why they didn't get far down the road with him. But I played with Craig. He's a fantastic coach, good guy, all of that. He's a hard, accountable guy, a lot like Rick Tocchet. Well, Travis is the same way. I played junior with him, and he was a high scoring forward. And then by the time he made the NHL, he was more of a two-way, smart player that could chip in offensively. So he's been able to adapt to every one of his situations as a player, and now I believe in a coach. So yeah, there might be more, we'll call it sexier names out there, or might have been sexier names. Dean Evison, I heard, had
Mhm.
interviewed Todd McLellan, who I had Todd in Houston in the AHL. They're all kind of former players that are hard but fair. So it sounds like they were very comfortable with where Travis was at, his headspace, the way that he wants to coach the team and be very aligned. Um, my question, or more my statement to Senators fans, would be wait until the finished product of everything is done and then judge him on his body of work with that new group. And I say new group because no team is year to year is the exact same. So we'll see what kind of moves they have. And if they get a deeper team on paper, and if Travis, can now go to work with that. So I think there is, I guess I would say, and I think people would probably admit the jury's out because the proof's in the pudding. If the team has success, the move will look like genius. The team doesn't have success, people say, well, why didn't you do that? And I guess there's one, now it's a different scenario, but you could
Mm.
point to, because when Edmonton was at the bottom of the league, did anybody know who Chris Knobloch was?
Nope.
Exactly. And yes, Edmonton on paper was a better team, but Chris Knobloch deserves a lot of credit for coming in and stabilizing the boat. Paul Coffey had never coached in the NHL, just comes down from the press box. So there's a lot of things that early on, including myself, challenged going, man, if that could go south in a hurry. Let's see how it unfolds.
Mm.
Well, Edmonton ends it up north of 100 points, challenging Vancouver for, first in the division. And, they're in the second round. So we'll see if the Senators, with a new coach, a new coaching staff, maybe a new philosophy, and then some new players, can really turn things around quickly.
Did you always think that Travis would be a coach, like playing with them in the NHL? Was that something that was brought to your attention?
I've always, the thing I've always known about Travis, he's really smart.
Mm,
So he read the game well, student of the game, understood. The one thing he always watched games. So he knew pre-scouts of other teams. And this is way before we did a lot of pre-scouting back in the day.
mm,
He's just a very, very observant guy. He's a very good communicator. He's a player's coach, but not buddy buddy with guys. Just gives them the respect they deserve. But then he's hard on them, and he says, like, if you hand out respect, or sorry, if you hand out some discipline with respect, like, the players, they won't have a problem with that.
mm. That's funny because he essentially said the same thing yesterday at the presser. Just, if you give guys accountability at the end of the day, they'll probably uh, you know, take to it if you give it with respect and dignity. So it's
Yeah,
interesting that you said that
that
before.
that doesn't
Mhm.
surprise me. That with Greeny, that's kind of, he's a guy he's very great sense of humor, funny guy, but I could see guys respecting him of what he's got to say. He's passionate and he is going to hold them accountable, but he's going to do it in a respectful way and not embarrass them.
Before I let you go, and thanks so much for taking the time here, Jamie. Just a fun little end off. Do you have a Stanley Cup prediction as we sit here today on May 9th? Is the cup coming back
So
home?
at the start of the playoffs, I chose the Rangers and Colorado. Those were the
Hmm.
two that I said was going to be in the finals. And that wasn't, it happens to be working out right now. We'll see how it looks. But I had happened to, through Ottawa, get to see them live, quite recently, right near the end of the season. And the Rangers were really impressive in New York. And then I got to see them in Toronto one night. And the same thing with Colorado. Um, I really put, I call it respectfully, possessed McKinnon. If the goalie holds up, all he needs to be is good. He doesn't have to be great. But you look at Makar and McKinnon and Rantanen, and that Nichushkin's just so strong you can't move them. I just think they're a force to be reckoned with. So, coin flip there. I did have the Rangers winning the cup, and it was more kind of maybe superstitious of them. A President's Trophy team
hmm
winner maybe winning the cup too, because they always say the curse. But I did some sort of NHL poll or whatever, and that's kind of what I had was Colorado and the Rangers in the cup and the Rangers winning it. So who knows?
No, I have a bunch of family in Winnipeg and watched the Jets series, and man, Colorado was
They're
unbelievable. You
they're a
watch
serious
that,
team. Yeah,
they look like a cup team. They look like 2022. So, uh,
yeah,
hopefully for you, I'm sure you're not allowed to bet on it, but maybe it'd be funny to see if you put a wager and see if you're good at the end. But thanks so much, Jamie, for taking the time and doing this, and get some sleep and rest up for the rest of the playoffs and maybe some drama in Leafland. Thanks so much, Jamie.
absolutely. Thanks for having me.